The courtroom was dead silent. The judge, a woman in her 60s, with a sharp gaze, looked down at the boy standing before her. He barely reached the top of the podium. His tiny fingers clutched a small stuffed bear, his round, innocent eyes darting nervously around the room. The audience whispered in disbelief. How could this be? The prosecution had laid out the shocking details: a massive security breach, a top financial firm system hacked, files stolen. Millions of dollars compromised. The company had gone into full panic mode. When they traced the breach, they expected to find a seasoned cyber criminal, a mastermind hidden behind layers of encrypted firewalls. Instead, they found him, Ethan Carter, a 5-year-old boy. The judge cleared her throat, struggling to process the situation. Ethan, she said slowly, do you understand the charges against you? The little boy nodded, hugging his teddy tighter. Yes, ma'am. The entire room timed. The judge narrowed her eyes. Why did you do it? Ethan tilted his head, confused. Then in a soft but clear voice he said, because they were being mean. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The judge leaned forward. Who was being mean? Ethan hesitated, his tiny fingers pressing into the fur of his bear. He looked at the lawyers, the crowd, the company executives glaring at him from across the room. And then he spoke the words that made everyone freeze. I only wanted to help. Silence, a thick, heavy silence, filled with more questions than answers. 2 months earlier, Ethan Carter was no ordinary child. From the time he was 3, he could take apart a computer and put it back together. By 4, he was coding his own simple programs. And by 5, he could read complex programming languages faster than most adults could read a bedtime story. But Ethan was also a kind boy. He loved helping people. He would fix his neighbors' computers for free. He would teach his classmates how to use tablets. And most of all, he loved his mother. She worked hard, too hard. A single mother, she juggled 2 jobs to provide for Ethan, one at a local diner and another cleaning offices late at night. Ethan hated seeing her so tired, but she always smiled for him, always told him that as long as they had each other, they'd be okay. And everything changed one evening. Ethan sat on the couch waiting for his mom to come home. He had his laptop open, working on a puzzle game he was designing. But when she walked in, she looked different. Her shoulders slumped, her eyes red. Ethan's little heart squeezed. Mommy, he asked, are you okay? She forced a smile. I'm fine, sweetie. Just a long day. But Ethan wasn't convinced. He saw the unpaid bills on the counter. He noticed how the fridge wasn't as full as before. He heard the worried phone calls she tried to keep from him. He didn't understand everything, but he understood enough. His mother was struggling, and Ethan hated feeling helpless. That night, he did what he always did. When he wanted to fix something, he turned to his laptop. He started researching. At first, he looked up jobs that paid more, but nothing seemed right. Then he started looking into the company his mom cleaned for, Diner Financial Group. They were a huge firm handling millions of dollars in transactions every day. And then Ethan found something strange. An article that mentioned how the company had been caught underpaying its janitors and kitchen staff, including people like his mom. They were fine before, but they just found ways around it. His tiny fist clenched. They were being unfair, and Ethan had never liked unfair things. That night, while the world slept, a 5-year-old boy sat in front of his blowing screen, his fingers moving at lightning speed. He slipped into the company's system like a shadow. No one noticed. No alarm sounded. It was almost too easy at first. He just looked around, files, reports, emails, all stored neatly. And then he found something really interesting, a hidden database. Inside, Ethan saw money, not just any money, but bonuses. Huge ones going to the company's top executives, more than enough to pay the workers fairly. His little heart raced. That wasn't right. He thought about his mom cleaning offices late at night, while these people took more money than they needed. That's when he had an idea. Ethan didn't want to steal. He didn't want to hurt anyone. He just wanted things to be fair. So he did something he thought was small. He changed the numbers just a little, just enough to rear out some of those giant bonuses back into the payroll system. And then he logged off. It was the first time Ethan ever felt powerful. The next morning, his mom woke up to a strange email. A bonus had been added to her paycheck, a huge one. And she wasn't the only one. Every janitor, every kitchen worker, every underpaid employee suddenly had more money in their accounts. Ethan beamed when he saw his mom's shocked, happy face. He had fixed something, but he had no idea what he had just started. Days later, door executives noticed a breach. They launched an internal investigation. The numbers weren't adding up. A hacker had slipped in, and they were going to find out who. Ethan, oblivious to the chaos he had caused, went back to playing his puzzle game, his teddy bear sitting beside him. But soon the game was going to change, because the world was about to discover the genius behind the screen, and they weren't ready for him. The news spread like wildfire. Diner Financial Group hacked millions reallocated to low-wage workers. At first, people assumed it was a sophisticated cyber criminal, maybe a rogue employee or An underground hacker group experts were brought in. Investigators combed through the system's cybersecurity teams worked around the clock. But the breach was too clean, no digital footprints, no errors, nothing. It was as if a ghost had entered the system, made a few changes, and disappeared. Diner CEO Richard Calloway was furious. He stormed into the boardroom, slamming a thick report onto the table. How did this happen? He bellowed. We pay millions for security, and some lowlife just waltzes in and takes our money. One of the specialists, a nervous-looking man with glasses, hesitated before speaking, so they didn't take anything. They just redistributed the funds. Calloway's face turned red. I don't care, find them. But finding the hacker was proving impossible until Ethan made his first mistake. One evening, while playing on his laptop, he noticed something strange. The money he had reallocated was being taken back. The company had caught. Ani frowned, frustrated. They weren't playing fair, so he did something simple. He went back, in this time, he didn't just move the money. He left a message, a single line of code that displayed on the CEO's personal computer screen. The moment he logged in, play fair, or I'll do it again. The message sent shockwaves through the company. The hacker wasn't gone. They were watching. Panic spread among the executives. Who was behind this? How are they getting in? Diner immediately contacted the FBI. Now it wasn't just a corporate issue. It was a federal investigation. But Ethan, he had no idea the world was closing in on him. That night, Ethan's mom came home with groceries, real groceries, fresh fruit, milk, even a box of cookies. She looked happier, lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. Ethan grinned. Did you get a raise, Mommy? She ruffled his hair, something like that. Sweetheart. Ethan felt warm inside. He had helped. But then something unexpected happened. The next morning, when he woke up and turned on his laptop, he saw something that made his heart stop. A message, not an email, not a pop-up, a direct system alert flashing on his screen. We know you're out there, and we're coming for you. Ethan's small hands trembled. His breathing became quick and shallow. He wasn't scared of computers, but this was different. Someone knew someone was looking for him for the first time since it all began. Ethan felt something he hadn't before, fear. Meanwhile, at an FBI cyber division office, two agents sat staring at a screen filled with lines of code. Agent Daniel Roberts, a man in his late 30s with a sharp mind and a reputation for tracking down hackers, frowned. This doesn't make sense. His partner, Agent Sarah Mitchell, leaned in. What doesn't? Roberts pointed at the screen. This hacker, their coding style is different. It's not what we usually see. He hesitated, searching for the right word. Childish. Mitchell raised an eyebrow. Childish. Roberts nodded. The way they structured their code, the simplicity of their entries, it's almost playful, like someone who's not worried about covering their tracks because they don't think they'll get caught. Mitchell scoffed. That doesn't make sense. A kid couldn't pull off a breach like this. Roberts didn't respond because deep down a small nagging voice told him that maybe, just maybe, they were about to uncover something no one would believe. Ethan sat at the kitchen table staring at his untouched cereal. His mother noticed. What's wrong, honey? He shook his head. Nothing. But inside, he was panicking. He needed to fix this. He needed to disappear before they found him. That night, after his mom went to bed, Ethan climbed onto his chair, turned on his laptop, and did what he did best. He started erasing everything. He wiped logs, removed traces, and buried his entry points so deep that not even the FBI could find them. At least that's what he thought, because he didn't know that somewhere in an FBI office across the city, Agent Roberts was staring at a new digital trail, and it led straight to him. Roberts leaned back, stunned. We found him, he whispered, and then with a slow, stunned shake of his head, he added, God help us, HK. Just a kid. The air inside the FBI office was thick with disbelief. Agent Daniel Roberts sat in stunned silence, his eyes locked on the screen. The digital trail they had followed, the one leading to the mastermind behind the Diner hack, didn't point to some underground criminal network or a rogue programmer. It pointed to a small suburban home in Illinois, to a 5-year-old child. Agent Sarah Mitchell leaned over his shoulder, reading the same results. This has to be wrong, she muttered. Roberts exhaled, slowly rubbing his temples. I triple-checked this. Is the source? Mitchell frowned. What kind of hacker leaves a breadcrumb straight to their home? Roberts tapped the keyboard, scanning the coding style again. A kid who doesn't think they're doing anything wrong. Mitchell shook her head. Are you seriously telling me a 5-year-old hacked into one of the most secure financial firms in the country? Roberts leaned forward, staring at the screen as if it held all the answers. I don't know how else to explain it. A long silence filled the room. Then Mitchell spoke again. So what do we do? Roberts closed his laptop. His decision already made. We pay him a visit. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, fidgeting with his cereal spoon. He could feel that something was wrong ever since the warning message appeared on his laptop. He hadn't slept properly. He tried to cover his tracks, but something in his gut told him it wasn't enough. Ethan, sweetheart, you okay? His mom asked, sipping her coffee. He Forced a nod, yeah, his mother smiled. But he could tell she was still worried about bills, about work, about everything. And now Ethan had given her something new to worry about. Without her even knowing, the sound of a car pulling up outside made him jump. He turned to the window, his heart pounding. A black SUV. Ethan's stomach twisted into a knot. He knew what that meant. His fingers clutched his teddy bear under the table. They found him. A firm knock on the door echoed through the small house. Ethan's mother frowned, setting down coffee. Who could that be this early? Ethan's hands were clammy. He already knew. His mother walked to the door and pulled it open. The sight of two people in dark suits standing outside made her stiffen. Miss Carter, Agent Roberts asked, flashing his badge. FBI, we'd like to have a word with you. Ethan's mother swallowed hard, glancing at her son. FBI. She shook her head, confused. I don't understand. What's this about? Out Roberts hesitated. He had handled dozens of cases before. Cyber criminals, fraudsters, digital espionage. But this was the first time he'd ever had to say these words. It's about your son. Her face went pale. She stepped back, instinctively putting herself between Ethan and the agents. My son? What do you mean? Mitchell cleared her throat. Ma'am, we believe your son may have been involved in a cyber crime. Ethan's mother laughed, not because she thought it was funny, but because it was absurd. You think my 5-year-old committed a crime? Ethan sat frozen at the table, his small hands gripping his teddy so tightly that its stuffing nearly burst. His mom shook her head, still trying to process the situation. That's ridiculous. He's just a kid. He barely knows how to tie his shoes. Robert sighed. Ma'am, I know this is hard to believe, but we have reason to think your son hacked into Diner Financial Group. Ethan's mother opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her eyes flickered toward Ethan, looking for any sign that this was a mistake. That's when she saw it. The way his little fingers fidgeted, the way he avoided her gaze, and suddenly she wasn't so sure. Ethan, she asked, her voice soft but firm. Honey, what are they talking about? Ethan's throat was dry, his heart thumped so loud he thought they could hear it. His voice was barely a whisper. I didn't mean to do anything bad. His mother stared at him. Ethan, what did you do? Tears went up in his eyes. He didn't want to lie. He didn't want to hurt her. So he told the truth. I just wanted to help. His mother's breath hitched. Ethan sniffled, looking down at the table. They weren't paying you enough. I saw it. They were keeping all the money for themselves. It wasn't fair. His mother covered her mouth with her hands. Ethan's voice cracked. I didn't steal anything. I just moved it around. Agent Roberts sighed. Miss Carter, I think we should all sit down. Ethan's mother staggered to a chair as if her legs barely worked. You're saying my son hacked into a corporation? Mitchell nodded. And not just any corporation, a multi-billion-dollar financial firm with top-tier cybersecurity. She turned to Ethan, and he did it in a way that not even our best analysts could track. Right away, Ethan sniffled. Am I in trouble? Roberts exhaled. That's complicated. His mother snapped back to reality. Huna, child. She shouted, you can't arrest him. Mitchell held up her hands. We're not here to arrest anyone, ma'am. But we do need to figure out what happens next. Ethan wiped his eyes. I just wanted to help, he whispered again. And for the first time, Roberts felt a painful twist in his chest. This wasn't a criminal. This was just a boy who loved his mom, and now the whole world was about to find out about him. The world knew within hours of the FBI visit. The news exploded. 5-year-old hacker exposes corporate greed. Federal agents investigating child prodigy hacked $1 billion firm. But was it a crime? Meet the kindergarten genius who outsmarted the FBI. TV stations ran the story nonstop. Talk shows debated whether Ethan was a criminal or a hero. Social media went wild with millions of posts about the baby Robin Hood. Ethan Carter was no longer just a kid. He was a legend. Back at home, his mother was overwhelmed. She paced back and forth, running her hands through her hair as her phone rang nonstop. I can't believe this. This is insane. Ethan sat on the couch, hugging his teddy bear. His face was on the news. People were talking about him. Some were calling him a genius. Others called him a criminal. A deep pit formed in his stomach. He never wanted any of this. The FBI agents were still there, sitting in their small living room. Agent Roberts looked exhausted. He hadn't expected the media to catch on so fast. Mitchell scrolled through her phone, her expression grim. It's everywhere. People are already calling him the little cyber avenger. She sighed. This is getting out of control. Ethan's mother snapped. Out of control? You're telling me my son is 5? He should be playing with Legos, not being talked about like some kind of... She struggled to find the words. Criminal? Ethan finished softly. The room fell silent. His mother turned to him, her expression softening. Baby, no, you're not a criminal. Ethan swallowed hard. Then why are they saying I am? Agent Roberts sighed. Because the law doesn't care about intent, it only cares about actions. Ethan's mother glared. So what happens now? Are you taking him? Roberts shook his head. No, not yet. Mitchell cut in. But the company is furious. Dinosaur is demanding legal action. They want to make an example out of whoever did this. Ethan's mother's face twisted in anger. An example he's a kid. Robert's side. Look, the truth is we've never seen a case like this. There's no clear law on what happens when a 5-year-old does something like this. That's why everything is blowing up. Ethan sat quietly, his tiny hands gripping his teddy bear. He didn't understand everything, but he understood one thing. They were deciding what to do with him, like he wasn't even a person. Like he was just a problem to solve. Meanwhile, across the city, Dinocio Richard Calloway was livid. He stood in his office, watching the news, his face red with rage. This is ridiculous, he barked. A 5-year-old. Are we seriously letting this slide? His lawyer, a thin man with a cold expression, cleared his throat. Public opinion is against us, sir. If we push too hard, it'll make us look like villains. Calloway's hands clenched into fists. We are the victims here. That brat stole from us. Technically, the lawyer corrected. He returned the money. Just a different people. Calloway slammed his fist on the desk. I don't care if we let this go. It sets a dangerous precedent. What's next? Toddlers hacking banks. Preschoolers bringing down Wall Street. His phone bust. His assistant's voice came through. Sir, you have a call from the White House. Calloway's face fell back. At Ethan's house, the tension was unbearable. His mother tried to argue, tried to demand answers, but no one really knew what would happen next. Then another knock at the door. Everyone timed. Ethan's mother's voice wavered. Oh God, please tell me that's not Robert. Stood cautiously opening the door. A man in a sharp suit stood outside. He wasn't FBI. He wasn't a reporter. He was someone more powerful. Good evening, he said, stepping inside. My name is William Grayson. I work directly under the President of the United States. Ethan's mother gasped. Roberts narrowed his eyes. What's the White House got to do with this? Grayson smiled. Because this case isn't just about a company anymore. His eyes landed on Ethan. This boy is a national security asset. The room froze. Ethan looked up confused. What's an asset? Grayson crouched down, his gaze sharp but kind. It means, kid, you're special. Ethan gulped. Is that good or bad? Grayson chuckled. Depends on who you ask. He turned back to the adults. The president has taken a personal interest in this case. We can't have a 5-year-old hacker just running around unchecked. Ethan's mother's voice shook. What does that mean? Are you trying to take my son? Grayson shook his head. No, we don't take kids. He smirked. That would be bad PR. She crossed her arms. Then what do you want? Grayson's expression turned serious. We want to make a deal. Ethan tilted his head. Deal. Grayson lean forward. Ethan, how would you like to work for the United States government? Ethan's teddy bear slipped from his fingers, landing softly on the carpet. His little heart pounded. His mother gasped. Roberts and Mitchell exchanged shocked glances. And for the second time that week, Ethan Carter's life was about to change forever. The room was silent. Ethan's mother stared at the man in the suit, her mouth slightly open. Agent Roberts rubbed his temples, looking just as shocked. And Ethan, he wasn't sure whether to be excited or terrified. You want my son to work for the government? His mother repeated, her voice sharp with disbelief. Grayson smiled, but there was something behind his eyes. Something. Calculating. Work is a strong word. Let's say help. Ethan clutched his teddy bear again. Help with what? Grayson crouched down to his level. Ethan, do you know what you did? The little boy hesitated. I moved some money around. Grayson nodded. Right. And you did it in a way that no one could trace. Do you know how hard that is? Ethan shrugged. It wasn't that hard. Roberts exhaled sharply, while Mitchell stifled a laugh. Grayson chuckled. See, that's the thing. To you it wasn't hard, but to the best hackers in the world it's almost impossible. Ethan frowned. But I didn't do anything special. Grayson's face turned serious. Yes, you did. Ethan glanced at his mother, who was still trying to process everything. I don't get it. Ethan said, why do you need me? Grayson's expression softened just a little. Because, Ethan, there are bad people out there, people who want to hurt others, people who want to steal, not like you did. But for real. Ethan swallowed. There are hackers working for criminals, for enemy governments, for dangerous people. Grayson continued. And if a 5-year-old can break into $1 billion company, what do you think someone evil could do? Ethan's tiny hands squeezed his teddy bear. He never thought about it like that. Grayson leaned. And we need minds like yours. People who see the world differently, people who can stop the bad guys before they do something terrible. Ethan looked down. But I don't want to stop bad guys. I just wanted to help my mom. His mother's breath caught. Grace gave a small nod. I know. And that's why we're here. We're offering you a deal. Ethan tilted his head. What kind of deal? Grayson glanced at his mother, then back at Ethan. No charges, no trials. The government will make sure you and your mom are taken care of. But in return, we want you to come work with us in a special program. Ethan's mother stood up. Absolutely not. Grayson's face remained calm. Miss Carter. No, she snapped. You're talking about my son like he's some kind of a weapon. He's just a little boy. He still watches cartoons and sleeps with a teddy bear, for crying out loud. Ethan hugged his bear tighter. Grayson sighed, standing up. Miss Carter, I understand how you feel. No, you don't. She cut in. You don't know what it's like to be a Single mom to work 2 jobs to barely get by, and now you want to take my son and turn him into some kind of a government experiment. Grayson held up his hands. Nobody's taking him. Her voice shook. Then why are you here? Grayson sighed. Because this situation is bigger than you realize. Dinah wants blood. They're pressuring the Justice Department to press charges, serious charges. Ethan's stomach dropped. His mother's face paled. He's 5. Grayson nodded, which is the only reason this isn't already in. Cordy took a step forward. I'm offering you a way out. You both get protection. And Ethan gets a future. Ethan's mother sat down, her hand shaking. I don't know. Ethan looked up at her, then back at Grayson. What if I say no? Grayson's face darkened, just slightly. Then I can't promise that this goes away. Silence. Ethan looked at his mother, her tired eyes, the worry lines on her face, the exhaustion that never left her. She had spent years protecting him. Maybe it was his turn to protect her. He took a deep breath. Okay, his mother's head snapped up. Ethan, he looked at her, his little face. Serious, Mom. I don't want you to get in trouble. I can do. This tears filled her eyes. Baby, you don't have to. Ethan managed a tiny smile. I wanted. Grayson nodded, extending his hand. Then we have a deal. Ethan reached out his small hand and shook at it. And just like that, his life changed forever. 2 days later, Ethan stood in front of a new building. It was huge, made of steel and glass, with security cameras watching from every corner. A government facility. His mother held his hand tightly as if afraid to let go if anything happens to him. Grayson smiled. I give you my word he'll be safe. Ethan looked up at the building, his heart pounding. This was at the beginning of something big. A man in a lab coat stepped outside, smiling warmly. You must be Ethan. Ethan nodded. My name is Dr. Bennett. The man said, we're very excited to meet you. Ethan glanced at his mother one last time. She bent down, cupping his face. Are you sure? She whispered. He nodded. I'll be okay, Mom. She kissed his forehead. I love you, baby. I love you too. And with that, Ethan Carter, 5-year-old computer product, stepped into a world he never imagined, and nothing would ever be the same again. Ethan stepped into the building, his small sneakers squeaking against the polished floors. The air smelled different, like metal, and something sterile, like a hospital. But without the beeping machines, Dr. Bennett led him down a long hallway where men and women in lab coats worked at giant computers, their screens filled with things Ethan barely recognized. This is a special program, Dr. Bennett said as they walked. The people here work on cybersecurity, defense systems, and technology the world doesn't even know exists yet. Ethan's eyes widened. Like secret stuff. Dr. Bennett chuckled. Very secret. Ethan glanced at the screens. What's that? Dr. Bennett followed his gaze. That's an AI defense system. We're developing. It's meant to stop cyber attacks before they even happen. Ethan tilted his head. It's slow. Bennett blinked. What? Ethan pointed at the lines of code running across the screen. It's taking too long to process. If a hacker was really fast, they get past it before it even reacted. Dr. Bennett's mouth fell open slightly. And how would you fix that? Ethan shrugged. Make it predict the attack before it happens instead of just reacting to it. Bennett stared at him. The head of cybersecurity, a tall woman with glasses, looked up from her station. Did that kid just say what I think he said? Bennett nodded slowly. The woman turned to Ethan. You understand how this works? Ethan shifted on his feet. I think so. She gestured to a chair. Show me. Ethan hesitated. Am I allowed? Dr. Bennett smiled. Ethan, in this building, there's only one rule. Ethan blinked. What's the rule? Bennett leaned and show us what you can do. Ethan climbed onto the chair, his small fingers barely reaching the keyboard. He scanned the code. It took most people years to understand something like this. Ethan did it in seconds. This part is too slow. He muttered, adjusting the script. And this one, it's checking too many things at once. That makes it confused. He moved things around, deleting some lines, rewriting others. His fingers flew across the keyboard. The woman with glasses crossed her arms. I don't believe this. Dr. Bennett just smiled. Ethan pressed enter. The system recalibrated. The screen flashed as the defense program suddenly became twice as fast. The room erupted. Engineers and cybersecurity experts rushed forward, watching in awe. He just improved our firewall in under 3 minutes. No way a kid just did that. This should have taken us months. Dr. Bennett patted Ethan's shoulder. Welcome to the program, kid. Ethan grinned. For the first time since all of this started, he felt like he belonged. But as Ethan settled into his new world across the city, someone else was watching. Inside the headquarters of Diner Financial Group, CEO Richard Calloway fumed as he watched the news. 5-year-old hacker to work with government on cybersecurity advancements. He slammed his fist on his desk. They're turning him into a hero. His lawyer adjusted his tie. So the White House made it clear that any further action against the boy is off limits. Calloway's jaw clenched. I don't care what the White House says. That kid humiliated us. He made us look weak. The lawyer hesitated. So, what do you want to do? Calloway's eyes darkened. I want to make sure he never touches another computer again. Back at the facility, Ethan was having the time of his life. He had his own computer, his own big monitors, and access to systems most people didn't even know existed. He was learning things that weren't in any books. And best of all, he wasn't doing it alone. There were other kids. He met a girl named Riley who was 9 and built AI programs for fun, a boy named Jake who was 11 and could hack into anything. They weren't just kids, they were geniuses. They were like him. For the first time, Ethan wasn't the odd one out. He had friends. But just when Ethan started feeling safe, things went wrong late one night while Ethan was asleep. In his room at the facility, his computer screen flickered on. Lines of red coat ran across the screen. And then a message appeared. You don't belong here. Ethan's heart stopped. He sat up, his breath quick, and shaky. More words typed themselves out on the screen. Leave now, or you'll regret it. Ethan's hands trembled. Who are you? He typed for a moment. Nothing. Then the answer appeared. Someone who knows what you did. Ethan's blood ran cold. He stared at the screen, his tiny fingers frozen over the keyboard. Someone was watching him, someone dangerous, and they wanted him gone. Ethan's heart pounded. His screen glowed in the dark room. The red text burned into his mind. You don't belong here. Leave now, or you'll regret it. Someone who knows what you did. His tiny fingers hovered over the keyboard. His breath was shaky, his mind racing. Who was this? How did they get in? And most importantly, what did they want? Ethan swallowed hard and typed back, who are you? For a few seconds, there was nothing, just silence and the glow of the screen. Then a new message appeared. You should have stayed hidden, kid. Ethan's stomach twisted. His hands were sweaty, but his instincts took over. Whoever this was, they were dangerous, and they were inside the system. He didn't think, he just acted. Ethan's fingers flew over the keyboard, running a security trace. He needed to find them before they disappeared. He narrowed his eyes. They were fast, too fast. Whoever this was, they weren't some random hacker. They were good. But so was Ethan. He dug deeper, setting traps inside the system, rerouting their signal. The red messages kept coming. You think you're smart, you're playing a game you can't win. Stop now. Ethan didn't stop. He was so close to tracing them, and then black screen. The entire system shut down. To the room went dark. Ethan sat in pitch black silence, his heart racing. Then a knock at the door. Ethan's body froze. Knock, knock, knock. He squeezed his teddy bear, his tiny hands trembling. Another knock, then a voice. Ethan. It was Dr. Bennett. Ethan nearly collapsed from relief while the door creaked open. Dr. Bennett stepped inside, his face serious. Are you okay? Ethan hesitated. He glanced at his screen. The system was dead. Something happened. He whispered. Bennett stepped closer. What do you mean? Ethan licked his lips, trying to explain. Somebody got into the system. They sent me messages. They told me to leave. Bennett's face darkened. What? Ethan clutched his bear tighter. I tried to track them, but then everything shut down. Bennett's expression turned from concern to alarm. He rushed to the computer, pressing a few keys. Nothing. The system was completely fried. Bennett turned back to Ethan, his voice urgent. What did the messages say exactly? Ethan swallowed. They said, I don't belong here. Bennett's jaw clenched. Ethan hesitated and added, and they said they know what I did. Bennett's eyes narrowed. Did they say who they were? Ethan shook his head. Bennett turned toward the door. Stay here. Wait. Ethan called, panic rising. Who was it? Was it the FBI diner? Bennett didn't answer. He left the room, moving quickly. Ethan sat there gripping his bear. Something was very, very wrong. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, in a dark office, Richard Calloway stared at his screen. His private hacker sat in front of the glowing monitor, his fingers tapping rapidly. The kid almost traced me. Calloway's jaw tightened, and the hacker smirked. He's good, really good, but not good enough. Calloway leaned forward, his eyes cold. Is he scared? The hacker chuckled. Oh yeah, he's scared. Calloway smiled. Good, keep watching him. The hacker nodded, his fingers moving again. And just like that, they knew where Ethan was. Back at the facility, the entire security team was on high alert. Dr. Bennett sat in a high-tech control room scanning for the breach. Agent Roberts stood next to him, his arms crossed. This wasn't a random attack, Roberts said. Bennett nodded. No, this was targeted. Roberts exhaled sharply. Someone doesn't want Ethan here. Bennett stared at the blacked-out screen. And I think we both know who. Roberts clenched his jaw. Diner. Bennett nodded. They're not done with him. Roberts glanced at the security monitors watching Ethan's room on the screen. He's just a kid, Roberts muttered. Why are they so scared of him? Bennett looked at the black screen one more time. Because they know what he's capable of. Ethan lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the red text on his screen. He heard the warning, you should have stayed hidden. Ethan knew one thing for sure now. This wasn't over, was only just beginning. He couldn't sleep. The warning kept replaying in his head. You should have stayed hidden. You don't belong here. Whoever sent that message wasn't just trying to scare him. They meant it. He pulled his blanket over his head, his heart pounding. Maybe he was in over his head. Maybe his mom was right. He was just a kid. But then a new thought hit him. If someone was as desperate to scare him away, that meant they were afraid of him. And Ethan Carter didn't like bullies. The next morning, the facility was buzzing. Dr. Bennett was in the main cybersecurity lab, speaking in hushed voices with Agent Roberts and a group of tech experts. Ethan, sitting in a chair across the room, could tell from their faces things were bad. Our Riley, the 9-year-old AI prodigy, popped down. Beside him, you look like you saw a ghost. Ethan frowned. I kinda did. Riley raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Ethan hesitated. He hadn't told anyone except Dr. Bennett about the message. He wasn't sure if he was allowed to, but Riley was smart, really smart. So he told her. Riley's face grew serious as he explained. When he was done, she leaned. And you think it was? Then Ethan nodded. Riley bit her lip. Then why didn't they just send agents to get you? Ethan frowned. What do you mean? Riley adjusted her glasses. If Dinah wanted to shut you up, they wouldn't warn you. They'd make you disappear. Ethan's blood ran cold. She was right. If Dinah was behind this, why not just send people to grab him? Why not attack? Unless it's not them, Ethan whispered. Riley's eyes widened. Then who before Ethan could answer, Dr. Bennett called out. Ethan, Riley, over here. They both stood and walked toward the group of adults. Agent Roberts crossed his arms. Ethan, we need to talk about last night. Ethan Gould, did you find out who it was? Bennett exhaled. No. And that's the problem. Roberts leaned in. Whoever hacked into our system. They weren't trying to get in. Ethan tilted his head. What do you mean? Roberts' face darkened. They were already inside. A heavy silence filled the room. Ethan's stomach turned. You mean someone here? Bennett nodded. That's the only explanation. They had security clearance. They bypassed everything because they already had access. Ethan's hands clenched. Someone inside the government was working against him, someone close. And if they were already here, that meant they could strike at any time. Meanwhile, in a dark conference room in Diner headquarters, Richard Calloway sat across from a mysterious figure in a gray suit. Unlike Calloway, who was red-faced and fuming, the man in gray was calm, too calm. Calloway slammed his fist on the table. I don't care at the government. Recruited him. That kid humiliated me. HEK a liability. The man in gray smiled slightly. Then let me handle it. Calloway narrowed his eyes. Who are you? Exactly. The man in gray chuckled. Someone who deals with problems. Calloway's expression darkened. And what do you plan to do? The man in gray stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. Just watch. He turned to leave. But before he walked out the door, he glanced back. Oh, and Calloway frowned. What the? Man's smirk deepened. Next time, don't underestimate children. And then he was gone. Back at the facility, Ethan was done waiting. Someone was trying to scare him, someone inside the program. And if they thought they could outsmart him, they were wrong. That night, after everyone went to bed, Ethan slipped out of his room and headed straight to the cybersecurity lab. The room was empty, the glowing monitors casting long shadows. Ethan climbed into a chair's fingers hovering over the keyboard. He took a deep breath and started hunting whoever sent that message. Was sloppy. They left behind something they had to. Ethan pulled up system logs, scanning for any strange activity. And then their single IP address. It was partially hidden, scrambled in layers of security. But Ethan was fast. He bypassed the firewalls, tracing it back. His heart pounded. Almost there. And then the screen went black. Ethan's stomach dropped. The whole system shut down again, and then the door behind him clicked. Ethan turned slowly. A shadow stood in the doorway, tall, silent. Watching him, Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. The figure stepped forward, the dim light revealing a familiar face. Dr. Bennett. Ethan exhaled. Dr. Bennett. But then he stopped. Something was wrong. Dr. Bennett wasn't smiling. He wasn't scolding him for sneaking into the lab. He just stood there watching, too still. Ethan's skin crawled. Something wasn't right. Dr. Bennett took another step. You shouldn't be here, Ethan. Ethan's stomach turned. His mind raced. Was Dr. Bennett the one who sent the message? No, that didn't make sense, did it? Ethan gulped. I was just trying to help. Dr. Bennett nodded slowly. I know. Then he smiled. But it wasn't the warm, kind smile Ethan was used to. It was cold. And then he said the words that made Ethan's blood turn to ice. But you helped too much. Ethan bolted. He ran, and he didn't look back. Ethan ran. His small feet pounded against the cold tile floor, his breath sharp and ragged. His heart felt like it would explode behind him. Dr. Bennett's footsteps followed, not running, just walking slow, steady, like he knew Ethan had nowhere to go. Ethan's mind raced. He didn't understand. Dr. Bennett had been kind to him. He had helped him. So why was he acting like this? Why did his smile feel wrong? Ethan rounded a corner, his socks sliding on the smooth floor. He caught himself and kept running. He needed to find someone. He needed Agent Roberts. Meanwhile, in The security room agent Roberts was reviewing the night surveillance footage when a red alert flashed across his screen. Unauthorized system access. Detected his stomach dropped. Now he clicked into the security feed, and his blood froze. The camera showed Ethan running down the hall, and behind him Dr. Bennett. Something was very, very wrong. Roberts jumped from his chair, grabbing his radio. Mitchell, we've got a problem. Ethan turned another corner and slammed into someone's legs. He gasped. Looking up Agent Mitchell, she grabbed him by the shoulders, eyes wide. Ethan, what's going on? Bennett, Ethan wheezed, pointing behind him. He's acting weird. Mitchell didn't hesitate. She pulled her gun and turned just as Dr. Bennett stepped into view. Stop. Right there, she ordered. Bennett didn't stop. He kept walking calm and unbothered, like none of this was real. To Mitchell's grip on her gun tightened. I said stop. Bennett tilted his head, still smiling. You have no idea what you stumbled into. Agent, a chill ran down Ethan's spine. Mitchell's finger twitched over the trigger. Try me, Bennett. Finally, he stopped. His smile faded just a little. And then he sighed. Well, he muttered, I was hoping to do this quietly before Mitchell could react. The lights went out. Everything was pitch black. Ethan froze. He heard Mitchell shift beside him. Stay close, kid. Then a crash. Mitchell fired her gun, the shot echoing through the hall's silence. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. What happened? Mitchell's breathing was heavy. I don't know. Just a sound came from the darkness. Not footsteps, not breathing, a low, distorted hum like a machine powering up. Mitchell grabbed Ethan's hand. Can't, we're leaving now. They turned and ran blind in the dark. Somewhere behind them, Bennett's voice rang out. But it didn't sound like him anymore. It was layered, mechanical. You shouldn't have run, Ethan. Ethan's blood ran cold. What was happening? Agent Roberts sprinted through the hall's flashlight. In one hand, gun in the other his. Radio crackled. Roberts. It was Mitchell's voice, but the signal was full of static. Mitchell, where are you? More static than not. Bennett. He's not. The radio cut out. Roberts cursed under his breath. Then the emergency lights flickered on, dim and red. And standing right in front of him was Dr. Bennett. Except it wasn't Dr. Bennett. His face looked the same. His posture was the same. But his eyes were empty. Roberts immediately raised his gun. Don't move. Bennett tilted his head. Then he smiled, and his voice came out wrong. You're too late, Ethan. And Mitchell burst into the main security lab. Mitchell slammed the door shut and locked it. She was panting, her hand still gripping her gun. Ethan trembled. What's happening? What's wrong with Dr. Bennett? Mitchell turned to him, her face pale. I don't think that's Dr. Bennett anymore. Ethan's stomach twisted. Then who is it? Mitchell swallowed hard. I think someone's controlling him outside. Agent Roberts held his gun steady. Bennett's head tilted too far, his joints cracking unnaturally. Then his eyes changed, glowing blue like a computer screen. And that's when Roberts realized the truth. Bennett wasn't being controlled by someone. He was being controlled by something. Roberts' grip on his gun tightened, and Bennett, or whatever was inside him, smiled wider. Then in a voice that sent pure terror down Roberts' spine, he said, the boy belongs to us. Now inside the security lab, Ethan's computer suddenly turned on. By itself, a message appeared on the screen, a single name, one Ethan had never seen before, but somehow he knew this was the enemy, knew this was who was behind everything.